Liverpool, England. The year is 1882. A cold wind swept across the crowded docks, carrying with it the smell of coal smoke, seawater, and damp timber. Hundreds of people moved through the harbour like restless shadows. Porters shouted. Horses pulled overloaded carts. Steam whistles echoed through the morning fog. For many people gathered here, this was not simply another day. It was the day they would leave England forever. Among the crowd stood 3 young women. None of them knew that within a few hours they would step onto a ship where they would become some of the only women among dozens of men. None of them knew how frightening the coming weeks would be, and none of them knew whether they would ever see home again. 19-year-old Mary Fletcher pulled her thin wool coat tighter around her shoulders. The cold seemed to cut through every layer of clothing she owned. She stood beside a weathered wooden trunk containing everything she possessed: a second dress, a worn Bible, a small photograph of her parents, and a pair of shoes that had already been repaired 3 times. That was all. Mary came from a small village outside Manchester. Her father had died when she was 14. A factory accident. One moment he had been working, the next he was gone. After his death, Mary entered domestic service. The work was exhausting. She woke before sunrise, cleaned fireplaces, scrubbed floors, washed laundry, prepared meals, and often worked until midnight. For 5 years she had served wealthy families. 5 years of endless labor. 5 years of answering bells. 5 years of being treated as though she barely existed. Now she was leaving, not because she wanted adventure, because she had no choice. Eliza, standing nearby, was 21-year-old Eliza Morgan. Unlike Mary, Eliza tried to hide her fear. She kept her chin raised and her shoulders straight. But inside, she felt terrified. She had spent most of her life working as a kitchen maid. The daughter of a coal miner, she understood hardship better than most. Her hands were rough from years of labor. Burn scars covered her wrists, small reminders of countless hours spent near hot stoves and boiling water. The advertisement had promised opportunity. Domestic servants were needed overseas. Good wages, moan and board, a fresh start. At least that was what the newspaper claimed. Eliza desperately wanted to believe it. And the youngest was Anne Carter. Only 18, she, and desperately homesick before the journey had even begun. Her mother had cried the entire previous evening. Her younger brothers had begged her not to leave, but jobs were disappearing. Food prices kept rising, and opportunities seemed impossible to find. The family's survival depended on Anne finding work abroad, so she had kissed everyone goodbye, and now she stood in Liverpool, staring at a future she could not imagine. The advertisement 3 months earlier, none of them had planned to leave England. Everything changed because of a newspaper advertisement. The notice was small, easy to overlook, but its message seemed almost magical. Domestic servants needed overseas, good homes, better wages, passage assistance available, immediate opportunities to women trapped in poverty. Those words sounded like salvation. Letters were exchanged, applications submitted, references checked. Eventually, acceptance notices arrived. The employers needed maids. The ship would depart in spring. Everything happened quickly. Too quickly. Before they fully understood what was happening, they were preparing to leave. Liverpool docks. Liverpool was unlike anything Anne had ever seen. The city seemed enormous. Smoke rose from factories. Church bells rang in the distance. Ships crowded every section of the harbour. Huge steamships towered above the docks, like floating buildings. Workers moved everywhere, loading cargo, unloading crates, preparing vessels for departure. The noise never stopped. Metal clanged, ropes creaked. Steam hissed, voices echoed endlessly. For young women from rural villages, the place felt overwhelming and frightening. First sight of the ship, then they saw it, their ship, a massive vessel sitting beside the dock. Its black hull stretched farther than any building in sight. Tall masts rose into the grey sky. Steam drifted from a funnel overhead. Men hurried across gangways carrying supplies, barrels, crates, bundles of rope, coal, food. Everything needed for a long ocean crossing. Mary stared upward. The ship seemed impossibly large, yet somehow also frighteningly small. Because soon it would be carrying hundreds of people across one of the world's most dangerous oceans. Leaving home as departure time approached, families gathered for final goodbyes. Some cried openly, others remained silent, a few appeared almost numb. They knew what these departures often meant. Many emigrants never returned. The Atlantic Ocean separated lives forever. Parents aged. Children grew. Years passed. Sometimes letters stopped arriving. People vanished into new worlds. Mary hugged her mother tightly. Neither spoke. Words no longer seemed sufficient. Eventually her mother whispered, "Write whenever you can." Mary nodded, fighting tears. Then they separated, perhaps for the last time. Boarding passengers slowly began boarding. A long line formed near the gangway. Officials checked documents. Names were recorded, trunks inspected. People moved forward one step at a time. The three women stayed together. Already they felt safer as a group. Around them stood dozens of men. Laborers, farm workers, sailors, tradesmen. Young immigrants searching for work. Most appeared harmless, but the imbalance was impossible to ignore. There were far more men than women. Far more. Mary noticed it first, then Eliza, then Anne. None mentioned it, yet all three felt the same growing unease. A strange feeling as they stepped onto the gangway. Anne glanced back toward the dock. England stretched behind her, familiar save. Known ahead lay only uncertainty. The ship swayed gently beneath her feet. She gripped the railing, her stomach tightened. For a brief moment she considered turning around, running back, finding her family, pretending none of this had happened. But it was too late. The line kept moving. The dock grew farther away, and her old life slowly disappeared behind her. Below deck, their assigned quarters were located below deck. The air smelled of wood, damp fabric, and machinery. Narrow corridors twisted through the vessel. Oil lamps cast weak pools of yellow light. Passengers squeezed past one another. Crew members barked instructions. The three women followed a steward toward their sleeping area. What they found disappointed them immediately. The room was tiny, far smaller than expected. Several bunks lined the walls. Barely enough room existed to stand comfortably. Privacy was almost non-existent. Everything felt cramped, temporary, uncomfortable. Yet this would be home for weeks. The realization as the day passed, the women explored sections of the ship available to passengers. And slowly, a realization emerged. The numbers were worse than they expected, much worse. Groups of men occupied nearly every area, smoking, talking, playing cards, sharing stories. Women were surprisingly rare. A few elderly passengers, one mother traveling with children, two married couples, and the three maids. That was almost everyone. Anna counted repeatedly. The conclusion remained the same. They were badly outnumbered. For the first time, genuine fear appeared. The departure late that afternoon, the ship finally departed. A deep horn echoed across the harbor. Crowds waved from shore. Passengers gathered along railings. Some cheered, others cried. The vessel slowly moved away from the dock. Liverpool began shrinking behind them. Buildings grew smaller. The shoreline faded. The distance widened, until eventually England became little more than a dark shape on the horizon. Many passengers remained silent, watching, thinking, wondering. The realization settled over everyone. There was no turning back now. First evening night arrived quickly. Cold winds swept across the deck. The ocean stretched endlessly in every direction, dark, emmy, powerful. Mary stood near the railing. She had never seen so much water. It seemed impossible, terrifying, beautiful, and completely indifferent to human lives. Beside her stood Eliza and Anne. The three women had already developed an unspoken rule: stay together, always, no exceptions. They did not yet know how important that rule would become. The Mena's darkness deepened. Groups of male passengers gathered throughout the ship. Some sang, some drank, others simply talked. Most appeared friendly enough, yet occasional glances made the women uncomfortable. Not dangerous, not openly threatening, just reminders that they were among strangers, far from home, far from protection, far from everything familiar. The Atlantic stretched around them, and there was nowhere else to go. The first night's sleep proved difficult. The ship creaked constantly. Waves struck the hull. Machinery rumbled endlessly beneath the floor. Passengers moved through corridors. Voices echoed. Doors opened and closed. Every unfamiliar sound seemed alarming. Annie lay awake, staring into darkness. Above her, wood groaned. Somewhere nearby, a baby cried. Footsteps passed outside. She pulled her blanket tighter, trying to feel safe, trying to believe everything would be fine. Yet a feeling deep inside refused to disappear, a feeling that this journey would be far more difficult than any of them expected. Outside, the Atlantic Ocean rolled endlessly beneath the moonlight. The ship pushed westward into darkness, and the three maids, surrounded by strangers and separated from everything they had ever known, drifted toward an uncertain future. By the third day, England was gone, not just from sight, from reality. The green hills, stone cottages, church bells, and familiar streets now felt like fragments of a distant dream. All around the ship stretched only water, endless water, grey water beneath grey skies. The Atlantic Ocean seemed to swallow the entire world. For Mary, Eliza, and Anne, that realization was more unsettling than they expected. There would be no stepping off, no turning around, no quick journey home. The ship itself had become their entire universe, and they were trapped inside it. Seasickness. The first challenge arrived quickly. Seasickness. As the ocean grew rougher, passengers began suffering. The ship rolled constantly, slid, the oars rattled, people stumbled through corridors. Many spent hours leaning over railings. Others remained in their bunks, pale, weak, miserable. Orne suffered the worst. She could barely eat. The smell of food alone made her ill. Every movement of the ship felt unbearable. Even standing became difficult. For 2 days, she barely left her bunk. Mary and Eliza took turns caring for her, bringing water, offering encouragement, helping her remain calm. Without them, she would have felt completely alone. A ship full of strangers as passengers settled into life aboard the vessel. Social groups began forming. Families stayed together. Laborers gathered together. Young men traveled in groups. Card games appeared. Songs echoed through passageways. Friendships developed. Arguments occasionally erupted. The ship had become a floating village, yet the three maids remained outsiders, not intentionally, but because their situation was different. Most passengers traveled with relatives, or friends, or spouses. The three women possessed only each other, and that bond grew stronger every day. The watchful eyes one evening, while crossing the main deck, Mary noticed something uncomfortable. Several men watching them, not speaking, just watching. She immediately looked away. Perhaps she was imagining things. Perhaps they were simply curious. Yet the feeling lingered. Later, she mentioned it to Eliza. Eliza admitted she had noticed the same thing. Annie nodded quietly. She had noticed too. Agon, nothing openly threatening occurred. No confrontation, no violence, no direct danger. Yet being among so many unfamiliar men created a constant feeling of vulnerability. The women began avoiding isolated sections of the ship. They traveled together, ate together, walked together, and returned below deck together. Always, the crew, the sailors themselves, seemed like creatures from another world. Weathered faces, scarred hands, voices roughened by years at sea. Some were friendly, others distant. Many appeared exhausted. Their lives were difficult. Storms, long voyages. Dangerous conditions, constant labor. The ocean showed little mercy. One older sailor named Thomas occasionally spoke with the women. He had crossed the Atlantic dozens of times, perhaps hundreds. His beard was turning grey. His eyes carried the tired expression of a man who had seen too much. One evening, Anne asked him a question. "Are storms common?" Thomas stared toward the horizon. "Out here?" He laughed softly. "Storms are always waiting." The answer did not comfort her. A different kind of fear at home. Danger felt understandable. Factories, illness, poverty, accidents. People knew what to fear. The ocean was different. The ocean created uncertainty. Every unusual sound became alarming. Every sudden movement caused concern. Passengers constantly imagined disasters, icebergs, shipwrecks, engine failures, massive waves. Stories spread quickly. Rumors spread even faster. And fear often grew larger than reality. The storm arrives. The first major storm arrived during the second week. It began quietly. Dark clouds appeared. The wind strengthened. The sea changed color. Experienced sailors noticed immediately. Passengers noticed shortly afterward. By evening, conditions had worsened dramatically. Rain lashed the deck. Waves struck the hull. The ship rolled violently. Furniture shifted. Passengers grabbed railings for support. Children cried. Crew members rushed across slippery decks. Orders echoed through the darkness. The Atlantic had decided to remind everyone who truly controlled the voyage. Locked below as conditions deteriorated, passengers were ordered below deck. For safety, nobody argued. The storm outside looked terrifying. Doors closed. Passengers crowded together in narrow compartments. The air became hot, humid, uncomfortable. People sat silently, listening, waiting. Every crash of water against the ship sounded enormous. Every groan of timber felt threatening. Anna wrapped her arms around herself. The vessel seemed alive. A giant wooden creature struggling against invisible forces hawsed past. The storm intensified, then intensified again. Night of fear. Few people slept. The ship pitched violently. Some passengers prayed, others cried quietly. Several became sick. The atmosphere grew tense. One massive wave slammed into the hull. The impact sounded like an explosion. Gasps filled the compartment. Someone screamed. For several seconds nobody spoke. Then the ship slowly righted itself. The voyage continued. But fear remained. Mary later admitted it was the most frightened she had ever been. Not because she thought the ship would sink, because she realized how helpless they truly were. If disaster struck, there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, only the ocean. The morning after, when dawn finally arrived, passengers emerged cautiously. The storm had passed. The sea remained rough, but the sky was clearing. Sunlight broke through clouds. Fresh air filled the deck. People smiled, lowered nervously. anxious stories of the previous night. Survival created relief. Relief created optimism. For a few hours, the ship felt almost cheerful, almost. The problem of privacy as days passed. Another challenge became impossible to ignore: privacy, or rather, the complete lack of it. Every space aboard the vessel was shared: sleeping areas, dining areas, corridors, washrooms. Everything. People constantly surrounded one another. Personal space barely existed. For women accustomed to modest Victorian social expectations, this reality proved difficult. Even simple daily routines became complicated. The ship never truly allowed anyone to be alone. Rumors. By the third week, rumors began circulating. Passengers always created rumors, especially during long voyages. Someone claimed thieves were operating aboard. Another insisted a passenger had disappeared. Others whispered about fights occurring late at night. Most stories proved exaggerated or entirely false, yet they fueled anxiety. Annie found herself becoming increasingly nervous. Every whispered conversation seemed suspicious. Every argument sounded dangerous. Every shadow appeared threatening. The isolation of the ocean affected everyone differently. A disturbing incident. One evening, a drunken passenger caused trouble. Nothing severe, but enough to alarm people. The man began shouting during dinner, arguing with another traveler. The confrontation quickly attracted attention. Crew members intervened immediately. The situation ended without violence, yet the incident left a lasting impression. For the first time, passengers witnessed how quickly tensions could rise. The ship suddenly felt smaller, more confined, more dangerous. Eliza's rule that night. Eliza introduced a rule, a serious one. If one of us goes somewhere, she said quietly, all of us go. Mary agreed immediately. Annie agreed as well. The decision seemed simple, yet it provided comfort. Together they felt stronger, safer, less vulnerable. In the weeks ahead, that rule would become essential. The endless ocean. Day after day, the Atlantic remained unchanged. Water, sky, clouds, nothing else. Passengers lost track of time. Days blended together. Monotony became exhausting. People longed for land. Any land. A distant island, a passing ship. Anything to break the endless emptiness. Yet nothing appeared, only ocean. The vastness was difficult to comprehend, and increasingly difficult to endure. The men below deck. As weeks passed, the women learned more about their fellow passengers. Many were honest workers, coal miners, farm laborers, ferry workers, men seeking opportunities abroad. Some were kind, others reserved. Most simply wanted better lives, yet numbers still mattered. Everywhere the women looked, groups of men filled the ship, talking, lawing, smoking, waiting. The imbalance never disappeared, and neither did the uneasy feeling it created. A conversation in the dark. One night, Anne sat beside Mary near a small porthole. Outside, moonlight shimmered across black water. The ocean looked endless, ancient, mysterious. Do you think we made the right choice? Anne asked. Mary remained silent for a moment, then answered honestly, I don't know. It was the first time either had admitted doubt aloud. Both stared into darkness, thinking about home, thinking about family, thinking about the future waiting beyond the horizon. A future they still could not see. The calm before something worse. By the end of the third week, conditions improved. The sea became calmer. Passengers relaxed. Lotta returned. Conversations became easier. For the first time, people began discussing arrival dates. Land seemed closer. Hope returned. Yet experienced sailors appeared uneasy. They watched the horizon frequently, studied the weather, spoke quietly among themselves. Something felt wrong. Something was changing. The Atlantic was not finished with them yet. And before the voyage ended, Mary, Eliza, and Anne would face the most frightening days of their journey. By the fourth week at sea, nearly everyone aboard had stopped counting days. Life had become a cycle of routine. Wake, eat, wake, repeat. The ocean remained endless. The ship continued westward, and everyone dreamed of land, especially Mary. She missed simple things: the smell of rain on stone streets, the sound of church bells, the sight of trees. Even factory smoke seemed comforting now. Anything was better than endless water. Yet the Atlantic still held one final test. Strange weather. The first warning came from the sailors. Their behavior changed. Again, crew members moved with greater urgency. Conversations became shorter. Faces became serious. Passengers noticed immediately. Experienced sailors rarely worried without reason. One afternoon, dark clouds appeared far ahead. At first, they seemed harmless. Then they grew, by hour, spreading across the horizon, swallowing sunlight, turning the ocean dark gray. Thomas, the old sailor, watched silently. Finally, he muttered, "This one's going to be bad." By evening, the wind arrived. Not a breeze, not rough weather. A genuine gale. The ship groaned beneath the pressure. Rigging snapped against masts. Cancer whipped violently. Passengers struggled to walk. Women clutched railings. Children cried. Crew members shouted above the noise. The ocean transformed. Massive swells lifted the ship, then dropped it again. Every movement felt unnatural. Every sound felt threatening. Fear returns. The three maids remained together. Always, the rule Eliza established weeks earlier had become second nature. None of them walked alone. Not once. As conditions worsened, they gathered below deck with dozens of other passengers. The atmosphere felt different this time, more serious. The previous storm had frightened people. This storm terrified them. Even seasoned travelers appeared nervous. No one laughed. No one joked. The room filled with silence and fear. The impact shortly after midnight it happened. A tremendous crash echoed through the vessel. The entire ship shook. Passengers screamed. Several people fell from benches. Lanterns swung wildly overhead. For one terrible moment, everyone believed disaster had arrived. A wave, an enormous wave. It had slammed into the ship with unbelievable force. Water burst across sections of the deck. Crew members rushed into action. Oars echoed through the darkness. The storm had become dangerous, very dangerous. Trapped below, hours passed. Nobody was permitted on deck. Passengers remained crowded together, listening, waiting, praying. Annie could hear every creak of timber, every groan of metal, every crash of water. The sounds felt endless. Her imagination became her enemy. Each noise suggested catastrophe. Each vibration suggested failure. Would the ship survive? Would they survive? No one knew. The missing passenger near dawn. Rumors spread through the compartment. A passenger was missing. Nobody knew details. Nobody knew what happened. Perhaps he was elsewhere aboard. Perhaps he had moved to another section. Yet uncertainty created panic. People whispered, speculated, feared the worst. The crew refused to discuss it. Their silence only increased anxiety. For the first time during the voyage, genuine panic threatened to spread. Mary's steps forward during the chaos. Something unexpected happened. Mary became the calmest person among them. Perhaps fear had exhausted her. Perhaps necessity demanded courage. Whatever the reason, she began helping others, comforting frightened children, showering water, offering reassurance. Even when she felt afraid herself, Eliza noticed immediately. So did Anne, the quiet village girl who once doubted herself had changed. The ocean was changing all of them. Morning light. Eventually dawn arrived. Weak sunlight pushed through clouds. The storm remained, but its worst fury had passed. Passengers cautiously emerged. The scene shocked them. Sections of deck were damaged. Ropes hung loose. Wooden railings splintered. Equipment had been destroyed. Evidence of the night's violence appeared everywhere. The Atlantic had spared them, but only barely. A different kind of respect after that storm. Passengers viewed the ocean differently. Before, many considered the voyage inconvenient, uncomfortable, boring. Now they understood. The sea possessed enormous power. Human beings survived only because nature allowed it. The realization created humility, even among the loudest passengers. Land, rumors days later, rumors returned. But these were different, hopeful rumors. Land might be near. Passengers gathered on deck constantly, scanning the horizon, matching for signs. Birds appeared occasionally. Floating debris drifted past, small clues suggesting civilization. Excitement spread. The journey might finally be ending. The following morning began like every other. Cold air, grey sky, rolling waves. Nothing unusual. Then a shout erupted from the bow. People rushed toward the railings. Passengers emerged from every corner of the ship. Even crew members paused briefly. Everyone looked toward the horizon. And there it was, land. First sight at first, it appeared insignificant. A dark shape, barely visible, almost imagined. Yet as hours passed, the shape grew. Cliffs emerged, trees appeared. Buildings became visible. After weeks surrounded by nothing but water, the sight felt miraculous. Some passengers cried, others laughed, several simply stared in disbelief. The voyage was ending. Relief for Anne. Relief arrived like a physical weight lifting from her shoulders. The fear, the uncertainty, the endless waiting. Finally it was over. She stood beside Mary and Eliza. The three women watched the coastline approach. Neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary. They had survived. Looking back as the ship neared harbour, Mary found herself thinking about Liverpool, the dock, the farewell, the fear she felt boarding the vessel. She realized something important. The girl who boarded that ship no longer existed. The Atlantic had changed her. Not dramatically, not visibly, but deeply. She had discovered strength she never knew she possessed. What awaited them? Their journey was ending. Yet another journey was about to begin. Finding work, finding housing, building new lives. The challenges ahead would be difficult. Victorian domestic service remained demanding wherever it existed. Long hours, steam rules, little freedom. Yet opportunities were greater than those they left behind. At least that was the hope. The final conversation as passengers prepared to disembark, Anne asked a question. Do you think we'll ever see England again? Eliza smiled sadly. Maybe. Mary looked toward the harbour, then toward the ocean behind them. I think part of us always will. The answer lingered in silence. Stepping ashore when the gangway finally lowered, passengers began leaving. One by one, families, workers, children, dreamers, survivors. And among them were three young women who had crossed an ocean together. 3 maids, 3 friends. 3 strangers who became family during one terrifying voyage. They stepped onto solid ground. The crowd swallowed them. Their future waited ahead, unknown, uncertain, full of possibility. Epilogue: thousands of women made similar journeys during the Victorian-era. Most traveled seeking work, security, opportunity. Many left everything behind. Some succeeded. Others struggled. But nearly all carried the same mixture of fear and hope. Ocean voyages in the 19th century were not romantic adventures. They were difficult, dangerous, and often lonely. For women especially, Life aboard ship could be uncomfortable and uncertain, yet these journeys helped shape entire nations. Behind every immigration statistic was a human story. A story of courage, a story of sacrifice, and a story of people willing to risk everything for a chance at something better. For Mary, Eliza, and Anne, that chance began in 1882, on a ship. In the middle of the Atlantic, outnumbered, but not defeated. That night, the wind howled outside the mansion. Rain tapped against the tall windows. The servants' quarters felt colder than usual. Annie sat on the edge of her bed, unable to sleep. The strange footsteps she had heard the night before still haunted her thoughts. Across the room, Mary and Eliza exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, Anne broke the silence. "I heard them again." The room instantly became still. Mary looked up. "What did you hear?" "The footsteps." Anne swallowed hard. "Someone was walking below us, very slowly." For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Mary surprised her. "I heard them too." Anne stared at her. "You did?" Mary nodded. "Last night, just after midnight." Eliza's expression changed, because she had heard something as well. Not footsteps, a door, a heavy door opening somewhere deep inside the house. The realization made all three women uncomfortable. None of them wanted to admit it. But something about Blackwood Street felt wrong, very wrong. The following day was exhausting. The mansion's owner was hosting guests for dinner. Servants rushed from room to room. Floors needed cleaning. Silver needed polishing, needed preparing. Every minute was filled with work. The housekeeper watched constantly, looking for mistakes, finding them whenever possible. By evening, the women were exhausted. Yet Anne could not stop thinking about the basement. The forbidden basement, the place servants were not allowed to enter. The place the housekeeper refused to discuss. The place where strange sounds seemed to originate. Late that night, everyone finally retired. The mansion became silent, dark. Still, at least it appeared that way. Annie lay awake, listening, waiting. The clock somewhere downstairs struck midnight, then one, then two. Nothing happened. Perhaps she had imagined everything. Perhaps exhaustion was affecting her mind. She closed her eyes. Then she heard it. A sound very faint, very distant. Footsteps slow, heavy, deliberate, walking somewhere below. Her eyes opened immediately. The footsteps continued. 1, 2, 3. Then silence sat upright. Her heart pounded. She listened carefully. Nothing. For nearly 5 minutes, everything remained quiet. Then came another sound, a door, a heavy wooden door, opening somewhere deep inside the mansion. The next morning, Anne told Mary and Eliza everything. Neither laughed, neither doubted her, because both had heard unusual sounds during the night. Different sounds, but unusual nonetheless. For the first time since arriving at Blackwood Street, genuine fear settled between them. Not the fear they felt aboard the ship. This was different, more personal, more mysterious, more difficult to explain. Mary lowered her voice. "Something is happening in this house." Eliza nodded slowly. "But what?" No one had an answer. That afternoon, while cleaning a hallway, Anne noticed something strange. A narrow door hidden behind a curtain. She had never seen it before. The door was locked. Dust covered the frame. Yet, faint marks on the floor suggested it had recently been opened. Someone was using it. Someone with access. Someone who did not want servants asking questions. Before Anne could investigate further, the housekeeper appeared. Her face instantly hardened. "Step away from that door." The words were sharp, almost angry. Anne obeyed immediately. But the message was clear. The door mattered, and whatever lay beyond it was being hidden. That night, the three women sat together in silence. The room felt smaller than ever. Outside, rain battered the windows. Inside, uncertainty grew. They had crossed an ocean-seeking opportunity. Instead, they had arrived in a house filled with secrets. Mary stared into the darkness. Finally, she spoke. "We survived the Atlantic." Eliza nodded. "We survived being outnumbered on that ship." Anne looked toward the door, then toward the floor beneath them, toward the mysterious sounds, toward the hidden basement, toward whatever secret Blackwood Street was concealing. A chill ran through her, because deep down she knew something. The terrifying voyage across the Atlantic had not been the most dangerous part of their journey. It had only been the beginning. And somewhere inside the mansion below them, a secret was waiting to be discovered. The following morning, Anne could think of little else besides the hidden door, the locked door, the door the housekeeper seemed desperate to keep secret. Every time she passed the hallway, her eyes drifted toward the heavy curtain concealing it. Every time she heard footsteps overhead or distant noises below, her curiosity grew stronger. Something was wrong in Blackwood Street. The question was simple. What? A warning 3 days later, the answer seemed no closer. The servants continued their exhausting routine. Wake before dawn, work until night, to sleep, repeat. Yet the atmosphere inside the mansion felt increasingly tense. Even the other servants seemed nervous. They spoke quietly, avoided certain topics, and never discussed the basement, not once. One afternoon, while preparing linens, Anne finally gathered enough courage to ask an older maid, a woman named Margaret. Margaret had worked in the house for nearly 6 years. If anyone knew the truth, it was her. Annie lowered her voice. "What's in the basement?" Margaret immediately froze. The reaction was instant. The vizzle. Fear flashed across her face. Then she looked around to make sure nobody was listening. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "Stop asking questions." Anne stared at her. "Why?" Margaret looked toward the door, then back at Anne. "Because girls who ask questions never stay here long." The ledger that evening. Mary made an unexpected discovery. She had been cleaning the master's study, a room rarely entered by servants. Most days she simply dusted furniture and left. But while cleaning a bookshelf, she accidentally knocked several papers onto the floor. As she gathered them, something caught her attention. A ledger. Old, leather-bound, covered in dust. Curious, she opened it. Inside were names, dozens of names. Young women, servants, housemaids, dates bars, employment records. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then she noticed something disturbing. Many names simply stopped. No resignation, no transfer, no explanation. Women appeared in the records for months, sometimes years, then vanished completely, as though they had never existed. The disappearance that night, Mary showed the ledger to Anne and Eliza. The 3 women sat in silence, reading, studying, comparing entries. The pattern was impossible to ignore. At least 15 women had disappeared from the records, gone without explanation, without notice, without destination. Annie felt a chill. Where did they go? Nobody answered, because nobody knew. The sound just after midnight, the sound returned. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate. This time all 3 women heard them. The footsteps moved directly beneath their room, back and forth, then stopped. A few seconds later came something new. A voice muffled, impossible to understand, yet unmistakably human. The 3 women stared at each other. The room suddenly felt colder. Someone was down there, someone hidden below the house. A decision the following morning. Mary made a decision. We find out the truth. Neither Anne nor Eliza argued. They were frightened, But they were also tired. Tired of uncertainty. Tired of secrets. Tired of fear. If something dangerous existed inside Blackwood Street, they needed to know. Before it was too late. The opportunity, the chance came sooner than expected. 2 nights later, the mansion hosted a large dinner party. Guests filled every room. Servants rushed everywhere. The housekeeper became overwhelmed. For the first time since their arrival, supervision weakened. Mary noticed immediately. So did Eliza. Late that evening, after most guests had retired, the 3 women slipped away, quietly, carefully, toward the hidden hallway, toward the curtain, toward the locked door. The key luck favored them, or perhaps fate. Earlier that day, Anne had noticed the housekeeper carrying a ring of keys. One key looked unusual, old iron heavy. Now that same key hung from a hook near the kitchen. Unattended, Annie took it. Her hands trembled. None of them spoke. The risk was enormous. If caught, they would lose everything, their jobs, their reputations, possibly much more. Yet curiosity pushed them forward. The door opens, the hallway felt unnaturally silent. Mary inserted the key. For a moment, nothing happened. Then came a click. The lock opened. The 3 women exchanged nervous glances. Annie slowly pushed the door inward. Darkness waited beyond. Stone steps descended into the earth. Cold air drifted upward, carrying the smell of dust and damp stone. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Eliza whispered, "We've come this far." And together they began descending. Below ground, the staircase seemed endless. Each step creaked softly beneath their feet. The darkness grew thicker, the silence deeper. Finally, they reached the bottom. A narrow corridor stretched ahead, lit by only a few weak lamps. The walls were stone, old stone, far older than the mansion itself. Annie felt her heartbeat quicken. Something about the place felt wrong. Ancient, forgotten. The room at the end of the corridor stood a door. Unlike the others, it was slightly open. Light spilled through the gap. The women approached carefully, slowly, quietly. Mary pushed the door wider and froze. Inside was not a prison, not a dungeon, not anything they expected. Instead, the room contained dozens of boxes, shelves, ledgers, tonks, records. Thousands of records, carefully organized, meticulously stored. Someone had been keeping secrets for years, perhaps decades. The truth begins to surface. Mary stepped forward first. She opened one of the ledgers, then another, then another. Each contained information, names, furrows, employment contracts, payments, transactions. The deeper they looked, the stranger everything became. The mansion owner was involved in something far larger than domestic service, something hidden, something illegal. And suddenly, the mysterious disappearances made terrifying sense. Footsteps behind them, then they heard it. A sound, not below them, not ahead. Behind them, someone was standing in the corridor, watching. The 3 women turned slowly, and in the doorway stood a figure, silent, motionless, he in shadow. For a long moment, nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then the figure stepped forward, and Anne's heart nearly stopped, because she recognized the face. It was someone she thought she could trust. Someone who had been watching them since the day they arrived at Blackwood Street. And the expression on that person's face made one thing painfully clear. The secret was out, and now they were in danger. For several terrifying seconds, nobody moved, nobody spoke. The 3 maids stood frozen inside the hidden room, surrounded by ledgers and records. The figure in the doorway slowly stepped forward. Light from a nearby lamp illuminated her face. Annie gasped. It was Margaret, the older maid, the woman who had warned them to stop asking questions. Not what they expected. Mary's heart raced. For a moment she believed Margaret had betrayed them, that she was about to call the housekeeper, or worse. Margaret looked exhausted. Dark circles surrounded her eyes. Her expression carried something deeper than fear. It carried desperation. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. Eliza stepped forward. "Then tell us what's happening." Margaret glanced nervously toward the corridor, as though expecting someone else to appear. Then she closed the door behind her, quickly, carefully, and locked it. The sound echoed through the underground chamber. The truth. Margaret walked toward one of the shelves. Her hands trembled. "You wanted answers." She pulled a ledger from the shelf, then another, and another. Each contained records of young women who had worked in the mansion over the years. Many of the names matched the ones Mary had discovered. Women who seemed to vanish. Women whose employment records suddenly ended. Anne swallowed hard. Where did they go? Margaret looked directly at her. They were sent away. The room fell silent. Sent where? Margaret hesitated, then answered, to houses owned by the master's business partners. A hidden business truth was disturbing. The mansion owner was not merely a wealthy merchant. For years he had operated an employment network. Young women arrived seeking work. Many were promised positions. Some received them. Others did not. Instead, they were quietly transferred to remote households, factories, and estates across the country. Most never had a choice. Letters were intercepted. Records were altered. Families back home often never learned what happened. The system wasn't illegal on paper, but it thrived on deception, fear, and exploitation. The women involved had almost no power. Why Margaret stayed? Mary stared at Margaret. If you knew all this, why stay? Margaret lowered her eyes. Because I had nowhere else to go. The answer hurt more than anyone expected. For years she had watched women arrive, watched them disappear, watched lives change forever, and she had remained silent. Not because she agreed with it, because survival left her few options. The Victorian world offered very little protection to poor women, especially women alone. The housekeeper suddenly footsteps echoed through the corridor outside. All four women froze. Someone was coming. The footsteps grew louder, closer, then stopped directly outside the door. Anne felt her heartbeat hammering in her chest. Nobody breathed, nobody moved. A shadow appeared beneath the doorway. The handle slowly turned, then stopped for several endless seconds. Silence filled the corridor. Finally, the footsteps retreated. The danger passed, for now. A dangerous discovery. Margaret led them deeper into the room. There she revealed something even more shocking. A cabinet locked, high behind stacks of boxes. Inside were letters, hundreds of letters. Unsent letters, letters written by former servants. Many begged families for help. Some described harsh conditions. Others pleaded to return home. None had been mailed. The realization horrified Anne. These women had tried to reach their loved ones. Someone had prevented it. Someone had kept them isolated. The plan. When they finally returned upstairs, dawn was approaching. None of them slept. The secret beneath Blackwood Street was now clear. The mansion hid years of exploitation, years of deception, years of suffering. But knowing the truth created a new problem. What should they do? Going to the authorities was dangerous. Powerful people were involved. Remaining silent felt wrong. Yet speaking openly could ruin their lives. For hours they debated, until Mary finally made a decision. We leave. The answer surprised everyone, even herself. We leave before they can send us away like the others. Preparing to escape, the next several days became a careful game. They acted normally, worked normally, spoke normally. never revealing what they knew, but secretly they prepared. Saving money, gathering belongings, planning routes, watching schedules, waiting for the right moment. The mansion owner remained unaware. So did the housekeeper, at least they hoped so. The letter on the evening before their planned departure. Anne discovered something tucked beneath her pillow. A folded piece of paper. No name, no signature, just a message. 3 short words. They know everything. Anne's blood ran cold. She immediately showed Mary and Eliza. The room became silent. Someone knew. Someone had discovered their secret. And suddenly, their plan to escape seemed far more dangerous than before. Outside, thunder rolled across the night sky. Inside Blackwood Street, shadows stretched across the walls. And for the first time since arriving, the 3 maids realized they might not have as much time as they thought.